My name is Renata, and I was 31 years old the day my brother's fiancée looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't welcome at their wedding. Not quietly. Not apologetically. She said it the way you tell someone the restaurant is closed, matter of fact, a little impatient, like I was the one making things complicated. "You're not welcome at our table," she said. Marcus agrees. "Don't make this difficult." I didn't argue. I picked up my bag, smiled at her the way you smile at a customs officer, and walked out of the room. What Delia didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the entire catering operation for that wedding ran through an account with exactly one authorized name on it. I'm not going to tell you whose name that was just yet. But I will tell you that 6 weeks later, in a rented ballroom in front of 114 people, a catering manager in a black vest said my name into a microphone. And the table where my family was sitting went so quiet you could hear the ice shift in the water glasses. That's where this story ends. Let me tell you where it started. Welcome back to channel, where quiet people let the paperwork do the talking. If you're new here, hit subscribe. A new story drops every week, and you will not want to miss what's coming. I want to tell you something about the kind of child I was, because it matters for everything that comes later. I was the one who read the fine print. Not because anyone asked me to, not because I was trying to be impressive. I just had this instinct from a very young age that the thing people glossed over in a document was usually the thing that mattered most. My mother signed a gym membership once without reading the cancellation clause. $42 a month for 2 years before she figured out how to get out of it. I was 12 when that happened. I watched her on the phone, embarrassed, trying to explain that she hadn't understood what she'd agreed to. I remember thinking, I will always read the whole thing. That instinct shaped my entire professional life. I work in contract logistics. What that means, practically, is that I sit between large clients and the vendors who serve them, and I make sure every agreement is airtight before any money moves. I review payment schedules, delivery conditions, liability clauses, cancellation terms. I find the ambiguities before they become disputes. It's not glamorous work. Nobody at a dinner party asks you to explain it twice. But it pays well, and it had been paying well since I was 24, which meant that by the time I was 31 I had a savings account that would have surprised everyone who knew me, a modest apartment I owned outright in a city with a reasonable cost of living, and a reputation at work for being the person you called when something was about to go wrong with a contract. My name is Renata Voss. I grew up in a mid-sized city in the Midwest, the kind of place where people still know their neighbors' cars and the local news covers high school sports on the front page. My parents, Frank and Lorena, had lived in the same house for 30 years. Nana Celia was the one who first noticed what was happening with Marcus and Delia before I had fully let myself name it. "That girl is reordering things," she told me on the phone about 8 months before the wedding. "I can't tell you yet what she's reordering them toward. But watch." I watched. Marcus had met Delia Harmon 2.5 years before their wedding at a work conference. She was in marketing. She was polished, quick, and socially precise, the kind of person who always knew whose attention to hold and whose to release. I didn't dislike her immediately. That would be too simple. What I felt early on was a kind of alertness. She was very good at making you feel assessed. Within 4 months of them dating seriously, Delia had started referring to certain family dynamics in a way that reframed them slightly. Little things. She'd say, "Marcus mentioned you tend to take over logistics. He finds it a bit much sometimes," with a smile that made it unclear whether she was being kind or delivering a message. She'd refer to family gatherings as a lot, and then look at Marcus with an expression that made him nod along. When I hosted Thanksgiving that year, she commented on the table settings twice in a way that technically sounded like compliments, but somehow left me feeling like I'd done something wrong. I told myself I was reading too much into it. Nana Celia told me I was reading exactly the right amount. The engagement was announced at a family dinner 13 months before the wedding. Marcus looked happy. Genuinely happy. The happiness of a man who has decided something and is glad to have decided it. I was glad for him. I hugged him. I told Delia congratulations, and meant it, at least provisionally. The wedding planning began almost immediately. And this is where I need to explain something that will become very important later. Marcus and Delia had a budget problem. Not a crisis. They weren't broke. But Delia had a very clear vision for the wedding she wanted, and that vision cost significantly more than what their combined savings could comfortably cover. The venue she'd chosen was a restored event hall on the west side of the city. High ceilings, original hardwood, the kind of place that photographs well and charges accordingly. The catering package she wanted included a 5-course plated dinner, a cocktail hour with past appetizers, and a dessert bar in addition to the wedding cake. The florals were elaborate. The photography contract was not cheap. Marcus came to me about 6 weeks after the engagement. He sat in my apartment kitchen with a cup of coffee and a spreadsheet he'd clearly been staring at for a while, and he told me they were looking at a gap of somewhere between $40,000 and $50,000 between what they'd budgeted and what everything actually cost. "I'm not asking you to cover it," he said immediately. I wanted to think through it with someone who understands contracts. Because there are vendors we're negotiating with, and I don't want to sign something I don't understand." I told him I would help. That was the beginning. Over the following weeks, I did what I do professionally. I reviewed every vendor proposal. I negotiated 2 of them down. I restructured the payment schedules so that deposits were staggered rather than front-loaded. I identified which contracts required a single authorized signatory for billing purposes, and because Marcus's credit history had a gap from a period of freelance work in his late 20s that made some vendors hesitant to extend him credit terms, several of those contracts ended up in my name, attached to my accounts. This was not unusual for me. I did it at work routinely. I explained it to Marcus clearly. "These are the accounts. Here are the login credentials. Here's how to transfer the authorization to your name once your credit is in better standing." He thanked me. He told Delia. She seemed fine with it, or at least she said nothing that suggested otherwise. I want to be very clear about something. I was not doing this to create leverage. I was doing it because my brother needed help and I knew how to help him, and it didn't cost me anything significant to do it. That is the whole reason. The catering contract was the largest single item. It ran to $41,000 for the full package: cocktail hour, plated dinner, dessert service, staffing, rentals. The company was called Meridian Hospitality. They were well-reviewed, reliable, and they required a primary account holder with established billing credentials. That account holder was me. I paid the initial deposit from my own account. Marcus reimbursed me within 2 weeks. The arrangement was that I would remain the authorized account contact through the wedding date, after which the account could be restructured or closed. Nobody thought very much about this at the time. I don't think Delia thought about it at all. The disinvitation didn't happen all at once. That's not how these things work, in my experience. They happen the way erosion happens, gradually, incrementally, each small shift barely noticeable until you look at the landscape and realize the cliff has moved. The first shift was about 6 months before the wedding. I had assumed I would be involved in the wedding party in some capacity. Not as maid of honor. Delia had a close college friend, a woman named Petra, who was clearly and rightly going to fill that role. But I was the groom's sister. I had been helping coordinate vendors for months. I assumed there was a place for me in the formal proceedings. At a family dinner in late winter, Delia mentioned that the wedding party was finalized. She went around the table describing who was in it. Petra, 3 other women from her side, and 2 men from Marcus's side. I was not mentioned. I waited until the dinner was winding down and asked Marcus quietly, in the kitchen, whether there was something I'd missed about the wedding party. He looked uncomfortable. Delia felt like it was getting too big, he said. She wanted to keep it tight. It's not about you specifically. I said I understood. I meant it, at least on the surface. It was her wedding. She could structure it however she wanted. But something in my chest went tight when he said it. Not anger. More like the feeling of a door closing in a room you hadn't realized you cared about. The second shift came about 2 months later. My parents called me, not together, but within a few days of each other, each using almost the same phrasing, which meant they'd been briefed. My mother said that Delia was hoping to keep the immediate family seating at the reception to Marcus's parents only, since it was important to her that his side of the family table reflect a certain cohesion for the photos. My father said it was just about optics and that I'd be seated at a nice table close by with some cousins and family friends. I asked, specifically, which table. There was a pause. Table 11, my mother said. The family table was table 1. I said I understood. I wrote it down, the way I write things down when I want to make sure I haven't misremembered them later. Table 11. Not close by. Not a slight, I was inventing. The third shift was the one I couldn't write off. It was a Sunday afternoon, about 6 weeks before the wedding. I was at my parents' house for a low-key family lunch. My parents, Marcus and Delia. After lunch, Delia asked if she and I could talk privately for a few minutes. Marcus and my parents moved into the living room. She and I stayed at the kitchen table. She was direct. I'll give her that. She didn't dress it up. I've been doing a lot of thinking, she said, and I want to be honest with you because I think that's more respectful than dancing around it. I don't think it's going to work to have you at the wedding. I kept my face neutral. Okay, I said. Can you help me understand why? There's a dynamic, she said carefully, between you and Marcus and between you and his parents that I think is going to be present in a way that I don't want in my wedding photos and in my wedding memories. I'm not saying it's your fault. I'm saying it's a dynamic that exists, and I'd rather not have it there. What dynamic are you describing? The one where you're the competent one, she said. Where you've managed things and fixed things, and everyone defers to you. Marcus has spent a lot of time in your shadow, whether you intended that or not. And I want his family to see him differently at this wedding. I need his family, his new family, my family, to see him as the man I see, not the younger brother. I sat with that for a moment. She wasn't being cruel, exactly. She was being controlled. There's a difference. I hear what you're saying, I said. I hope you do, she said. Because I also want you to know that Marcus agrees with this. We talked about it together. This isn't me overriding him. He supports this decision. And then she said it, the line from the thumbnail, the line that landed differently than anything else she'd said. You're not welcome at our table. Marcus agrees. Don't make this difficult. I looked at her. I let the words sit in the air between us. Then I smiled. Not a performance. Not a threat. The same smile I give to a vendor representative who has just told me their contract terms are non-negotiable. The one that means, I've heard you, and I'm already 3 steps ahead. I won't make it difficult, I said. I picked up my bag. I walked out through the living room, said goodbye to my parents and Marcus, who didn't quite meet my eyes, and got in my car. I sat in the driveway for approximately 45 seconds. Then I drove home. That evening I pulled out my file of vendor contracts. I laid them on the kitchen table. I went through them one by one. The florals were in Marcus's name, those he had signed himself once I'd negotiated the terms. The venue rental was in both his name and his parents', which was fine. The photography contract was in his name. The catering contract, Meridian Hospitality, $41,000, primary account holder, authorized billing signatory, was in my name. Attached to my credit account, with my email address as the contact on file. All of it. I read through the cancellation terms. I read through the modification policy. I read through the section on authorized account changes. Then I made myself a cup of tea and watched the evening news, and I went to bed. I did not call Marcus. I did not call my parents. I did not call Delia. I did not do anything at all for 9 days. I want to be clear about why. This was not strategic cruelty. I genuinely did not know for those 9 days what the right thing to do was. Part of me thought, call Marcus, have it out, see if there's a conversation that changes this. Part of me thought, they've made their decision, respect it, stay home. Part of me, the smallest and most honest part, thought, they didn't think about the contract. And now I have to decide what to do with that. On the 10th day, Nana Celia called. She didn't know what had happened. I hadn't told her. She just called on a Sunday evening the way she always did, asked about my week, asked about work. And somewhere in that ordinary conversation I heard myself say, Nana, Marcus and Delia asked me not to come to the wedding. There was a silence. Say that again, she said. I said it again. She didn't say anything immediately. I could hear her breathing. Then she said, very quietly, and the catering account. Still in my name, I said. Another silence. Renata, she said. What are you going to do? I don't know yet. Yes, you do, she said. You've known since the day you read that contract. You just haven't decided whether to trust what you know. We talked for another hour. She didn't tell me what to do. She never told me what to do, that wasn't her way. But by the time I hung up, I had decided. I was not going to cancel the catering. I was not going to do anything to the catering. I was going to attend the wedding. Not crashing. I want to be very clear about this. I was going to attend as the authorized account contact for the primary catering vendor, which was a role I legitimately held, which had never been formally revoked or transferred because no one had thought to revoke or transfer it. I called Meridian Hospitality on Monday morning. I spoke to the event coordinator assigned to the wedding, a woman named Claire. I introduced myself as Renata Voss, the account holder, and confirmed that I would be on site on the day of the event to manage any billing or account questions that arose. Of course, Ms. Voss, Claire said. We have you down as primary contact. Will you be attending as a guest as well? I'll be present, I said. I'll be available if you need to reach me for anything account-related.
Perfect, she said.
We'll make sure you're in the briefing. I confirmed my phone number, my email, and the account credentials. I thanked her and hung up. Then I called Nana Celia and told her I'd need a guest to walk in with. She laughed. Actually laughed, which I hadn't heard her do in months. Pick me up at 5, she said. The wedding was on a Saturday in early October. The restored event hall on the west side of the city was, I'll admit, beautiful. They had done the lighting well. Warm amber uplighting on the brick walls, candles at every table, the kind of atmosphere that makes even ordinary things look significant. Nana Celia wore a deep blue dress she'd had for 30 years. She looked extraordinary. I wore a charcoal wrap dress I'd bought specifically for this. Understated, professional, the kind of thing I'd wear to a high-stakes client meeting. Comfortable shoes. My phone in my jacket pocket. We arrived 40 minutes before the ceremony started. The ceremony itself was held in the main hall with the guests seated in rows. Nana Celia and I took seats near the back, which suited me fine. I had a clear sight line. I could see Marcus at the front, looking genuinely nervous in the good way, the way that means you understand the significance of what you're doing. I felt, watching him, a complicated kind of love. The sort that doesn't go away even when it's been handled badly. Delia walked in on her father's arm. She was beautiful. Her dress was everything she'd described when she'd first shown it to the family months earlier. She looked at Marcus with an expression of total absorption, and he looked back at her the same way. I watched the ceremony with my hands folded in my lap and my face quiet. Nana Celia's hand found mine during the vows. She squeezed once. When the ceremony concluded and the guests began filtering into the reception hall, Nana Celia and I moved with the crowd. The catering staff was already in position. Black vests, white shirts, trays of champagne being passed at the entrance to the reception space. I spotted Claire, the event coordinator, near the entrance to the kitchen corridor and made brief eye contact. She gave me a small professional nod. I nodded back. We found seats. Not table 11. There was a seating chart on an easel near the entrance, and Nana Celia was listed. She was family. She'd been invited. I was not on the chart at all. I sat in an empty chair at Nana Celia's table, which held several of Marcus's more distant relatives who did not know quite what to make of me but were too polite to say anything. The cocktail hour proceeded smoothly. The past appetizers were exactly what had been ordered. The bar service was running efficiently. I had a glass of sparkling water and watched the room. Delia moved through the space with Petra at her side, greeting guests, accepting compliments. At one point, she crossed to where Marcus's parents were standing and embraced his mother. She was radiant, composed, completely in control of the room. She hadn't seen me yet. I knew the moment she did because I was watching. She was mid-conversation with Marcus's aunt when her eyes moved across the room in a broad sweep and found my face. The sweep stopped. For 2, maybe 3 seconds, she went absolutely still, the way a person goes still when the information their eyes are sending doesn't match the information their brain expected. Then she composed herself. She finished the conversation she was in. She said something to Petra and moved away. Marcus saw me about 10 minutes later. He was crossing from the bar toward a cluster of his friends when his eyes landed on me, and something in his posture shifted. Not a dramatic reaction, just a slight tightening, a recalibration. He held my gaze for a moment. I gave him a small nod. He looked away. My father found me during the transition to dinner. Renata. He said my name quietly, standing close. You need to tell me what's happening. I'm a vendor contact, I said. I'm here in a professional capacity. He looked at me for a long moment. Something moved behind his eyes. Not anger, more like a man watching a problem take shape that he doesn't yet have the full dimensions of. Your mother is going to. I know, I said. It'll be fine, Dad. He moved away. The guests were called to dinner. The round tables were full. The candles were lit. The hall was loud with the specific warm noise of 100 people settling into a celebration. Nana Celia was seated at her table. I found a position near the side wall, visible, present, but not in the center of anything. The first course arrived. The catering staff moved through the room with practiced efficiency. Everything was running exactly as contracted. And then, between the first and second course, Claire appeared at my side. She leaned in slightly and spoke at a volume calibrated for the noise of the room. Not a whisper, but not carrying. Ms. Voss, she said, we've hit an issue. The card on file for the secondary billing authorization, Mr. Harmon's card, just ran a test charge for the second course draw, and it declined. Our system requires account confirmation before we proceed with service. I kept my expression professionally neutral. What do you need from me? Our policy, she said, is to confirm with the primary account holder. You're the primary. I need you to authorize continuation of service. I authorize it, I said. I also need to make an announcement per our company policy. When the primary account holder is confirmed on-site, it's a liability protocol, so there's a record of verbal authorization in front of witnesses. It's brief. I looked at her. That's your standard procedure? For any account where the primary holder is present and a secondary card has flagged, she said. Yes. I thought about that for a moment. I thought about Delia's face when she'd said, "You're not welcome at our table." I thought about Marcus not meeting my eyes in the living room. I thought about Nana Celia saying, "You've known since the day you read that contract. Do what you need to do," I said. Claire moved to the center of the room. She didn't use a microphone, she didn't need one. The hall had good acoustics, and she projected with the practiced clarity of someone who did this regularly. "Excuse me, everyone," she said. "My apologies for the brief interruption. I'm Claire with Meridian Hospitality. We just need to confirm account authorization for continued dinner service, as our secondary billing card has flagged. Per company policy, I'm confirming verbal authorization from our primary account holder on file."
She paused.
Ms. Renata Voss, thank you for your authorization. We'll proceed with the second course. The room did not understand, immediately, what it had just heard. Then it did. It rippled outward from the people who knew me, who knew Marcus, who knew that Delia had informed certain guests that the groom's sister would not be attending because there had been a family disagreement. Who knew that the name that had just been spoken aloud in this room was the name of a woman who was supposed to be nowhere near this wedding. The head table was the epicenter. I was watching it from my position near the wall. Marcus's parents, the Harmons, were seated at the head table. His father, Robert Harmon, was a man who had built a construction business from nothing and had strong opinions about how things should be managed. His mother, Patricia, was quiet and observant. They had been, over the course of the wedding planning, warm to Delia in the way new in-laws are warm when they want everything to go well. Patricia Harmon's head turned. Slowly, with the precision of a woman who has heard something she needs to locate the source of. Her eyes found me at the wall. She looked at me for a long, steady moment. Then she looked at Delia. Then she leaned toward Robert and said something close to his ear. His jaw set. Marcus had heard the announcement. I watched him process it, the quick look around the room, the locating of my face, the understanding arriving in stages. His hands, which had been resting on the table, went flat against the tablecloth. Delia's face had gone completely still. Not pale. She had too much composure for that. But the expression she'd been wearing, the one calibrated for this room and this evening, had gone blank in the way of a screen that has lost its signal. She did not look at Marcus. She did not look at Robert and Patricia. She looked straight ahead at the middle distance at nothing. That was the freeze beat. 114 people in a restored event hall on a Saturday in October, and the table that mattered most had gone as quiet as a room with no air in it. The second course arrived. The catering staff served it with the same smooth professionalism they'd brought to everything else. Life in the room resumed. Technically, forks moved, conversations restarted. The ambient noise of a dinner reception rebuilt itself. But around the head table, and at certain other tables where people had connected the name to the story, the quality of the silence was different. It was the silence of people who were recalculating. Robert Harmon excused himself from the head table approximately 7 minutes after Claire's announcement. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, the kind of person who occupies space without trying to. He walked directly toward me. I stayed where I was. "Ms. Voss," he said. He extended his hand. I shook it. "Robert Harmon," he said. "Marcus's father-in-law as of about 2 hours ago." A small, dry pause. "Can I ask you something directly?" "Please," I said. "Your name is on the catering contract." "It is." "As primary account holder?" "Yes." "The full contract?" $41,000, I said. "Cocktail hour, plated dinner, dessert service, staffing, rentals." I negotiated the terms and structured the payment schedule. "The account is in my name and attached to my billing credentials." He absorbed this. His expression was controlled, but there was something working behind it. "And you are the woman who was asked not to attend this wedding." "I was asked not to come as a guest," I said. "I'm here as the authorized account contact." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, "My son-in-law's family invited you to plan his wedding, and then didn't invite you to it." I didn't answer that. He nodded, once, slowly, the nod of a man filing something away. "Thank you for being straightforward," he said. He looked across the room toward the head table, where his wife was now in quiet conversation with Marcus. "I think there are some conversations that need to happen tonight." He returned to the head table. I watched him sit down. I watched him speak to Patricia. I watched Patricia's eyes find Marcus, then Delia, then come back to the table surface with an expression I recognized, the controlled neutrality of a person who has something significant to say and is choosing the time and place carefully. It was Marcus who came to me next. He came about 15 minutes later, during a lull between the second and third courses. He walked over to my position near the wall and stood next to me, not facing me directly, both of us looking out at the room in the way that two people sometimes do when a conversation is difficult, and it helps not to be eye to eye. "You're here," he said. "I'm here." A pause. "Renata." He said my name the way he used to say it when we were kids, and he'd done something he was embarrassed about, slightly flattened a little sideways. "The contract is in my name, Marcus," I said, keeping my voice level. "I want you to understand that I'm not here to blow up your wedding. I'm here because Meridian required an authorized contact on site, and I'm the authorized contact. I've done exactly one thing tonight, which is authorize the service to continue. Everything is running fine." He was quiet for a moment. "Delia doesn't know." "She knows now," I said. "Everyone knows now." He let out a breath. It wasn't a performance. It was the exhale of a man who has been holding something that is heavier than he expected. "I should have called you," he said, "after she talked to you. I should have called." "Yeah," I said. I kept thinking there would be a better time, and then there wasn't a better time, and then it was the week before the wedding and I didn't know how to." He stopped. "That's not an excuse." "No," I said. "It isn't." We stood together for another moment. The third course was arriving at the tables. The catering staff was moving smoothly through the room. "Is the whole dinner covered?" he asked. "Every course. The dessert bar. The cake service. All of it." He nodded. He didn't say, "Thank you." I think he understood that thank you was not quite the right currency for this particular transaction. "I'm going back to the table," he said. "I know." He walked back. I watched him sit down next to Delia. I watched her turn to him with a question on her face that I was too far away to hear. I watched him answer it. I watched her expression shift. Not dramatically, but enough. She closed her eyes for just a moment, the kind of closure that isn't peace but is the recognition that a thing has happened that cannot be unhappened. Patricia Harmon came to me after the cake was cut. She was more contained than her husband, more precise. She sat down in an empty chair near where I was standing and looked up at me with the expression of a woman who has made a decision. "I want to understand the full picture," she said. "My husband told me about the contract. I want to hear it from you directly." I sat down across from her and told her. Not the emotional version, I didn't give her that. I gave her the professional version, the same one I'd given Robert. The timeline, the account structure, the payment schedule, the authorization. The facts clean and in order. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "You negotiated the catering contract, structured the payments, held the account, and were then told you weren't welcome at the wedding 6 weeks before the date," she said. "That's correct. And you didn't cancel anything?"
No.
"Why not?" I thought about how to answer that. "Because my brother was getting married," I said finally. "And it wasn't my wedding to cancel." Something shifted in her face, not softening exactly, more like the acknowledgement of something she'd been waiting to confirm. She nodded. "I see," she said.
She stood.
She smoothed the front of her dress. "Thank you, Ms. Voss." She returned to the head table and sat down next to Robert. They spoke quietly. Their body language was contained but definite, the posture of people who have arrived at a shared conclusion. Delia, who had been watching from across the table, excused herself and went toward the restroom corridor. She didn't come back for a while. The rest of the wedding reception continued. The music started. Some guests danced. The cake was distributed. From a logistical standpoint, the evening ran perfectly. Every course delivered, every service executed. No disruptions beyond the one that had already occurred. But the social temperature around the head table had changed, and that change was visible to anyone paying attention. Robert Harmon spent most of the remainder of the evening in conversation with Marcus's father, Frank, my father. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I watched my father's face move through a sequence of expressions I recognized. The initial defensiveness, the recalibration, the quiet comprehension, the look of a man who has understood something he wishes he'd understood earlier. My mother came to me near the end of the evening, just before the last round of dancing wound down. She sat beside me and didn't say anything for a moment. "I didn't know about the contract," she said finally. "Not the specifics. Your father and I knew you'd helped, but we didn't."
"I know," I said.
"That's not an excuse either."
"No," I said.
"It isn't." She looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen from her in a long time, an unguarded one, the kind that appears when the performance of a family occasion drops away and what's underneath comes through. "We handled this badly," she said. "Yes."
"I'm sorry, Renata."
I let that sit.
"Thank you," I said.
She nodded and went back to her table. The fallout that followed the wedding didn't happen in a single dramatic scene. It happened the way fallout usually happens in families, incrementally, across conversations that extended over weeks and months. In the immediate aftermath, Robert and Patricia Harmon had a series of conversations with Marcus that I was not present for, but that Marcus later described to me with the particular discomfort of a man summarizing something that reflected poorly on himself. The Harmons, it turned out, had very specific opinions about how a person who had organized and financed a major family event should be treated by that family. Robert had come from a background where financial contribution was taken seriously as a form of care, and the idea that someone who had structured and secured $41,000 worth of vendor agreements had been shown to the door by people who'd benefited from those agreements did not sit well with him. "They didn't say anything dramatic," Marcus told me. "They just made it clear that it wasn't what they expected from a family they were joining." Patricia Harmon called me once, about 3 weeks after the wedding, to let me know that she and Robert had made a point of including me in their holiday plans if I was ever in their city. It was a small thing. It mattered. Delia's relationship with my parents did not recover cleanly. This wasn't something I engineered. I want to be clear about that. My parents had arrived at their own reckoning, and the Harmons' visible reaction had accelerated it. My mother told me, some months later, that the dynamic between her and Delia had become careful, the kind of careful that exists when both parties know something has been broken and neither is sure whether to try to repair it. Marcus and I took longer to repair things between us. It wasn't a dramatic reconciliation. It was more like a slow thaw, a call here, A dinner there, a gradual rebuilding of the shorthand we'd had. He apologized properly, without qualifications, about 4 months after the wedding. I accepted it. I don't think I need to tell you that it was complicated. Most true things are. About 2 months after the wedding, a billing statement arrived from Meridian Hospitality. The final payment draw on the account. I paid it, forwarded the receipt to Marcus, and sent a formal request to close the account and remove my name as primary holder. The account was closed within a week. I have the confirmation email saved. Not for any particular reason, just because I read the whole thing. Nana Celia, when I told her how the evening had gone, was quiet for a moment on the phone. "Did you make coffee when you got home?" she asked. "I did," I said. "Good," she said. "That's the right ending." There's something I think about sometimes when I'm reviewing a contract at work and I find the clause that someone glossed over, the one that changes everything. I think about how much energy goes into the performance of a thing, the flowers, the lighting, the seating chart, the question of who photographs well next to whom, and how little energy goes into the structure underneath it. The agreements, the authorizations, the names on the accounts. The performance is what everyone sees. The structure is what holds it up. I didn't go to that wedding to make a point. I went because I was the authorized contact, and because the structure was mine, and because no one had thought to check. They had spent months deciding who fit into the picture. Nobody had asked whose name was holding the picture up. That's my story. A folder full of vendor contracts, a phone call to a woman named Claire, and a name read aloud in a room full of people who'd spent weeks trying to make sure it wouldn't be. Here's what I want to know from you. If you'd been in that room, as a guest, as one of the Harmons, as a cousin at a side table who'd just heard that announcement, what would you have done? Would you have walked over? Stayed in your seat? Said something to my family? Or to Delia? Or nothing at all? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one.